Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This session is going to be slightly different from the previous sessions that we've had, which have looked at broader sweeps of macroeconomic policy, investment flows, and also what individual nations are doing and how attractive they might be. We're going to try and dig a little deeper under the skin, be a little bit more granular. The title of the session is Capital Shifts from Old Titans to Emerging Titans. And what we mean by that is which of the emerging markets are attractive. There's a gradual shift of the center of economic gravity from west to the east, which has been remarked on throughout these proceedings today. But what does that mean in more granular terms when you look at financial centers, how they're coping, how the Western financial centers responding to the growth of financial centers elsewhere in the world, and what does it mean in terms of market activity in these new centers? We have a fantastic panel today. We have Jerry, who represents Standard Chartered Bank China. We have Manola, who represents Citi and give a global view of banking. And we have Martin from First Abu Dhabi Bank, who will give a view specifically more from the region and Abu Dhabi. So let's take our seats and kick off, if we may. So my first question is for you, Martin. And obviously, Abu Dhabi is a very successful center. It's growing rapidly. It's doing very well. It's delivering economic growth. Against this background, how do you think it is positioned to benefit from this shift in the center of economic activity from the west to the east? How well positioned is it to achieve that?
Thank you, Maurice, and a very good afternoon to everyone. Delighted to join you on this panel. Yes, you are absolutely right. Abu Dhabi and the UAE more generally, have been doing fantastically well over the last few years. So they have benefited from a number of things. And I think we can say that all the stars have been aligned, for the last couple of years. So benefiting from reasonably elevated high oil prices, but also very stable and very predictable. And that has created liquidity in the UAE, definitely, and in the rest of the region. Liquidity which has had to be reinvested more and more locally and regionally. And really, the objective has been to transition, to do a profound, deep economic transformation and to move away gradually from oil and gas, and from the dependency to oil and gas. So in that context, diversification, to new industrial sectors, tourism, aviation, logistics, etc., benefiting very much from a fantastic geographical location, between the west and the east, benefiting a lot from the proximity, geographical proximity to India, which is booming, less than a 3-hour flight, from Abu Dhabi or Dubai, and a huge population, 1.4 billion people living next door almost, and benefiting also from a significant demographic influx within the country through some societal changes, change of the residency regulation, etc., which has benefited the whole country. So the UAE and Abu Dhabi in particular in a very strong position, investing a lot, in particular to offer a framework for the financial industry to grow and flourish, and develop, and really very tangible successes, over the last few years.
Very interesting. Manuel, Manola rather. Given that the other financial centers are to an extent losing out, nonetheless, New York and London remain 1 and 2 in the global pecking order. Singapore is at number 3. And when you look at Hong Kong and Shanghai and Shenzhen, they're all high on the list. And in fact, Abu Dhabi is at 35, despite a relatively small domestic market, so clearly punching above its weight in terms of this. How do you think the legacy, if you like, financial centers or the Western financial centers are going to respond to this potential threat?
Yeah, so I think what we've seen in the last years is a strengthening of the U.S. And I think the U.S. is definitely only going to grow What it's up for grabs is who is going to be second or who are going to be in those medals, let's put it, no? I think London post-Brexit is suffering a bit from that, a bit from regulation, a bit from certain companies now not wanting to be there, liquidity. So the reality is that in a world where obviously Hong Kong, and Jerry can talk more about that, obviously because of geopolitics is also probably not in its best moment. You have three emerging markets that are really shining and can shine more. One is India, second is Brazil, and obviously the third is the UAE. No? And of those three, I have to say that the UAE has a golden opportunity if I were to predict the future, especially if there is an approach of maybe one strategy, maybe think about what can be the most liquid market and how can you attract not only local issuers, but actually international issuers that are now playing globality. The West is not playing globality because of Ukraine. The South is playing globality, and the UAE is sitting potentially in an incredible place because of regulation, because of the state of the economy, because the potential. No? So what we see is obviously the Middle East has been a great market for IPOs, and we see that continuing. If anything, what we would like as an international bank is more that the international tranches grow and that there's more international capital coming into those IPOs. And on the debt side, I think that's a great story. I think that has only got better. I think obviously a lot of the national champions are issuing pretty much at the same levels as the Western peers, and we can see that only getting better. And again, there is just a question of stability and continuation.
And maybe if I may just comment on something Manolo just said, very amazing and impressive to see that the Middle East in 2023 has done more IPOs in number and volume than Europe.
Absolutely.
First time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
But in terms of stock markets, I mean, obviously, I was talking to a tech investor the other day who was deciding where to list. I was looking at London, he's looking at New York, and one or two other places. Developing local stock markets, a question for both of you really, developing local stock markets requires deep liquidity so that you get a decent price valuation, you get a good aftermarket. When do you think that the stock markets here outside of the well-established ones, when do you think that they will develop? I know in China you have a well-established stock market, but in the Middle East, when do you think that is going to, you have two incipient ones here, but when do you think it's going to grow into a major player?
You want me to go? I think the markets, every market has to go through a cycle, and I think this is what's happening. No, there's a lot of local government-owned companies going into the market. There's some private now really tapping, and as I've said, what you need, liquidity is the name of the game. No, so ultimately, if you want to play internationally, you're going to have to find a way for that liquidity to come. And that is a combination of more IPOs, which is happening. The pipeline is great. More private IPOs, that's coming. And international IPOs. Companies that instead of listing in the US or London or Europe or Hong Kong, they actually say, what is a place that is global? I'm a global company, and that has the regulation, the stability, and I think the medium to long-term outlook to say this is a good place. And I think that is up for grabs currently, and that is the opportunity, in my view, the region has, and within the region, the UAE.
Yeah. Is that something you'd agree with, Martin, on?
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Liquidity has been growing. There is clearly a desire, both in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai, and in Riyadh to do privatization. It has happened. And more also to attract issuances from the private sector, diversifying gradually from the energy sector and oil and gas sector to other sectors. So we have seen, for example, the first dual listing between Abu Dhabi and Riyadh in the consumer sector last year. You know, there are a few other transactions which are currently discussed. So I think more and more we will see regional listings and in far more diversified sectors. Yeah.
Jerry, looking at the rise of RMB as a global currency and used for trade and settlement, do you see an opportunity for the UAE to be an offshore RMB center? And what steps should it take to achieve that?
Thank you, Morris. Renminbi has come a long way in the last decade. Recent number shows that it has already become the number 4 most active trade currency, and also number 5th in terms of FX spot. There are multiple functions of renminbi has developed, not only trade, but also offshore deposits. We are seeing the deposits pool growing to 1.8 trillion, and Singapore has scored most, 27% year on year in 23, and Hong Kong 12%, London 3%. And also because of the interest rate differential between Chinese yuan and the US dollar, it's a range between 2 to 3% depending on the tenor. So renminbi also becoming a financing currency preferred by many Chinese corporates. So this is actually growing in a very notable way. So we do have a renminbi index that Standard Chartered has introduced 10 years ago. Last year, it reaches its record high in October, and the year before, 27% year-on-year growth. So huge potential. For UAE, very obviously, UAE is the trade and capital and people mobility hub for Middle East. 60% of the China export to Middle East is re-exporting to another 400 cities in the Middle East. And also in terms of renminbi, we did notice that President Xi had made a proposal to Middle East to use renminbi as a settlement currency for oil and gas-related transactions in the next 3 to 5 years' time. And last year, we see that both central banks have reviewed the currency swap to about $5 billion at the end of last year. So these are all very important foundation for UAE to become another international hub for the renminbi globalization. In terms of how, I guess it's also very evident. The market needs to have more denominated assets for people to choose from, right? So for the liquidity and deposits sitting in the region, they will then have a channel to reinvest. I think this is very important. Also, UAE can provide as an alternative time zone trading market, in addition to Hong Kong and Singapore, which is exactly in the same time zone as China, and London, which is 8 hours, behind China. So here it's actually 4 hours. That's another alternative. But infrastructure is very important. I think UAE is well positioned for that.
So a very, very good opportunity for the UAE. Obviously, another great opportunity, Martin, is sustainable finance. Here in the UAE, you hosted a tremendous COP28, and many congratulations to everybody who was involved in that. But the future of sustainable finance is very interesting. Virtually every financial center in the world is now pushing itself as that. In London, for sure, green finance is a central plank of the strategy. So how would the UAE differentiate itself? And is there the possibility that it might look at transition finance in the sense of financing oil and gas businesses on their way to net zero as a speciality? Is that something that might play to the strengths of the UAE?
Definitely. You point out on something very important, Maurice. First, let's recognize, acknowledge again, the success of COP28. It was really a tremendous achievement. I remember the president of COP28 saying before the event that the ambition was to have COP28 as important as the Paris Agreement for COP15. And I think it has been delivered. We talk today about the UAE consensus as we talk about the Paris Accord. And the UAE consensus is unique in the sense that for the first time it was a recognition that it needs to be gradual, that energy transition needs to be gradual. And yes, there is a very strong willingness and aspiration to move to renewable energies, but it has to be managed in a progressive and gradual manner. Now, in that context, with the success of COP28, Abu Dhabi being also the center for the International Energy Agency, with the commitment which has been taken by the UAE and Abu Dhabi in particular, I think we can say that Abu Dhabi and the UAE are already a global center for energy transition. Why can we say that? For the reasons I've just mentioned, but also because of the commitments which have been taken at COP28. The announcement, the creation of Altira, a $30 billion fund, largely contributed by the UAE, but with also the objective of raising about $200 billion of financing in the renewable energy sector. This is massive. This is more than what has ever been committed before, and coming in a remarkable manner, both from the private sector and governments. So this is already a great achievement and a very tangible, concrete result, outcome coming from COP28. You have also in the UAE a company which is already a global player in renewable energy with Masdar. Masdar, born in Abu Dhabi, but now truly global, doing business in the US, in the region, in Europe, in Asia, one of the world global leaders in that space. And finally, the banking sector in the UAE, on the occasion of COP28, has taken a very, very big commitment. 1 trillion dirhams of financing to be committed in this decade by 2030. And FAB, First Abu Dhabi Bank, has committed to do 50% of that, so 500 billion dirhams of renewable ESG compliant financing in this decade. So I would say that all the part of the ecosystem are working together, government, financial sectors, corporates, utilities, to achieve this objective.
Could I ask you just very briefly, ESG as a concept, though, it's come in for a fair amount of criticism. Some states in the US, Texas, for instance, is not giving mandates to investment firms who pursue ESG as a policy. Do you think it as an acronym, as a concept, it needs to be disaggregated and separated out, or do you think it's going to continue, or is it past its sell-by date? Everybody believes in the aims of it, but as a concept, how do you think that should be developed? Perhaps first, Jerry, do you have some thoughts on that from China's perspective?
ESG, right? Well, China has come a long way in developing its own ESG agenda. Yeah. And certainly, now is leading the market in many of the, categories of ESG products and solutions. For example, the EV cars, the batteries, panel cells, etc. Now they have become the top exporting, products to the world, and also, the solutions that China can provide to the rest of the world. So we are seeing many of the Chinese companies now establishing their presence in Middle East, onshoring some of their solutions. I think these are matching perfectly with the Middle East countries' national agenda. They're specifically to meet their national targets of net zero by 2050. So a huge amount of matching here And we see that trend is actually continue to grow and even stronger, faster.
Okay. Manolo, do you have a view on that? I mean, when Citi looks across the markets, you're clearly aware of what's going on in the US and the debate that's raging and the potential for the elections in November to deliver a Trump victory and what that might mean for ESG. Do you think that there's need for a new way of looking at it, or a new acronym even, or what do you think?
I think so. I think climate change is a long battle, and it's a tough battle. And I think, by the way, I agree with Martin, the UAE gave a real demonstration of how to organize something and orchestrate something at a global level. And compared to the previous COPs, I think this was impressive, I would say. And obviously some of the concepts and the investments show that the only way forward is to find a way to build investable projects, quite frankly. And that's going to be a combination of governments, it's going to be a combination of development markets and what type of blended capital can you get, and it's definitely the need for the private sector. So you're going to have to cut that into small pieces, you're going to have to go in each area of the world, and you're going to have to do tailor-made solutions where I do think that this COP has at least acknowledged certain principles that were important, but a lot of what's coming is the real importance, and that, for me, there's no other way than private sector and public sector really coming together, and ultimately, it's got to be under investable projects that make sense. So depend what you're trying to do. You'll have to have a different type of capital, but I think this was important. I think we're making progress.
Okay. Martin, would you agree with that before we move on to another topic?
I do, and maybe one last point coming back to the title of this panel, old titans to emerging titans. I think one of the strengths of the UAE today is its ability to work with everyone of goodwill, in the nation concert. The UAE is part of the BRI initiative, is part of the new IMEC initiative, which was announced at the last G20 in India. And this ability, to cooperate with all the major global powers has hugely facilitated, I think, the success of COP28 and shown, demonstrated the global influence of the UAE now.
But moving on to another of the big themes, obviously, AI has become something of a frenzy. I don't know how many AI companies have been set up, certainly in the UK, I can think of several hundred, in recent months alone. And the top 6 technology stocks on NASDAQ account for 49% of the total market capitalization. If you look at NVIDIA's shares, they've gone up by 435% since the start of last year. Do you think we're seeing a huge revolution and that this might has the potential to become a significant market? And how important is regulation in terms of all of this? There's a huge debate about the nature of the threat. So what are your views on that? First of all, Manolo.
Yeah, well, this is a huge topic, and we've got 6 minutes left, but I'll try. I think regulation and how to regulate AI is the big thing, right? And obviously then you've got the China view and probably the US view. If you look at the investment in AI over the last 10 years, over 80% of it has been done in US and China, right? So US is 2.5 times China, and then the rest is barely 15%. So one critical thing is investment. Another thing is energy. AI needs massive amount of energy, and that's where obviously other players, and certainly this region can play a role. And then you've got talent, no? And talent is, again, super important. And we just read yesterday, that a French startup with three young guys has been, Microsoft has taken a stake valued at $2 billion. So, and they just wanted to live in France, and they studied in the US, but they want. So I think talent is going to be the other big thing, right? And obviously, I do think that we hope that the world somehow gets into a better place, and that somehow the superpowers find a way to collaborate, because I think we all live better. But whatever happens, if you go into two worlds, obviously that's going to be the first cut, no? Yeah. Which is, are you on one side or are you on the other? Then you're going to have to say, how much money do I have to do this? And then, do I have the talent? So the reality is that, for me, AI, especially generative AI, is going to be the big players. The big players, NVIDIAs, the Google, the Microsofts, those are the ones that really can put massive balance sheets into it. And then every company in the world, whatever sector, will really have to have a strategy around that. And how am I going to play that? Because the world is going to change, and there's jobs that are going to go, there's processes that you can do different, there's new products that you can just launch in a different way. No? So this is a massive change, and those four pillars, I guess, are one obvious thing is you still have to have a unicorn in emerging markets in AI, right? So it's maybe, again, you can get the right people working in the UAE, no? Bring talent, no? Which I think is something you're doing extremely well, but you've got the money, you've got the energy, you've got the talent, then you'll have to play the global geopolitics, I guess.
Jerry, I saw you nodding with some of those points, but what's your take on this?
Well, I think same as ESG, AI, these two are the future two growth engine for mankind. Nobody can afford to lose on this battlefield. So actually, I think for China, the government is very clear on the strategy and on focusing the investment dollar into this field. So there are many emerging businesses. They are trying to find their way into the AI space, and for some of the big ones, big tech platforms are spending heavily on this. Certainly, there are a very visible distance still between China and the US. And I also agree with my colleague here is that if the two superpowers can work together, then the mankind stand a much higher chance to develop it in a secured manner. Because at the end of the day, developing is one thing. Security is perhaps even more important for humankind. So I guess this is a challenge. We haven't really find the answer. But the good thing is that I think last time, UK held a summit on AI.
Yes.
And China was invited. I'm very delighted to see that.
Absolutely.
Hopefully this is a good beginning of the journey. And we'll see the two powers coming together on that front.
I can see that we're slightly coming up towards the end of our time. So I just want to ask you, Martin, do you think that artificial intelligence is a new digital asset? Has that been put out into the cold, the crypto world, digital assets? I see, for instance, that the UAE has a very good regulatory structure for digital assets, both from DFIC and from ADGM. Do you think it still has the potential you once believed, or many people believed in?
I think technology and AI in particular, it's truly revolutionary, not evolutionary. As important that you had the invention of the PC in the 80s, internet the 2000, the smartphone 10 years ago, and now this is AI, and this is as important as those previous three transformations we have seen. So it is very profound. It will change things in a radical manner. And we are seeing that in our businesses already in banking. We are starting using AI. So in that context, the UAE have positioned themselves really as a champion, at least a regional champion, for promoting AI, attracting investors in that sector. You ask also about digital currencies. The the same. You have two financial centers, Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Both have developed a regulation, so the IFC or ADGM and VARA in Dubai, to regulate cryptocurrencies. And it has started well in attracting investors, exchanges in both financial centers. Manolo mentioned the importance of energy in the context of cryptocurrencies. It is critical for AI because you need big, huge data centers, and also for cryptocurrencies. And again, the UAE is in a sweet spot here, you know, abundant energy, solar, renewable energy. So that should help the country to position itself as one of the centers in this industry.
Jerry, just if you can give us your view from a Chinese perspective on cryptocurrencies versus digital assets. Two sides. I know what the official stance is on cryptocurrencies, but digital assets, the digitalization of existing financial assets and the value of that and blockchain, what's the viewpoint there?
Well, there are two different things, right? Digital currency is right now really dominated by the central bank. And I think China is way ahead of other major jurisdictions in terms of promoting its official digital currency, and we're actually, part of it as well.
Yeah.
And they're also doing similar thing for cross-border international type of the, central bank currency. But then in terms of digital assets, it's very heavily regulated. I think right now, Hong Kong, as a special economic administration, they are allowed to, nurture and develop digital assets in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
But in mainland, this is still very heavily regulated. But then blockchain is another matter. So, for example, the blockchain-enabled supply chain financing, etc., these things are developing extremely fast. So I guess the government is still, trying to find a way, navigating through between the reward and risk, because the risk of losing control is also, from a regulator point of view, very high. There's no, right or wrong at this stage, but I guess for different model to come along and try it out, maybe a good thing forward. So let's see how Hong Kong manages this, as part of China.
Very interesting. I think our time is almost perfectly up. One last question. Leaving aside the UAE and leaving aside China, in 10 years' time, which of the financial centers outside of the existing Western ones will be the most important, do you think? Martin.
I will vote for the UAE, obviously, as a very credible candidate for that position. Yeah.
What do you think, Manolo?
But it's outside.
Outside,
Yeah. So I think the US obviously will continue, and I think there will be a growing importance of some markets, which obviously outside that, I think India is going to grow big time. And I think Brazil, subject to politics, internal politics, but has a brilliant chance. I think London has an opportunity still, in our view, but again, it will need, and it will be all about what happens in European politics. But I think London still has a chance, but politicians have to, again, really make some changes into regulation there. So those three probably, I would say. Singapore will be stable, in my view. Strong, but stable.
And Jerry, I mean, somebody earlier today was saying, they were asking you, what's the next big thing? They said China, what's the next big thing after that? China. But leaving aside China for a moment and looking outside, 10 years' time, where would you see an interesting competitor as a financial center?
Well, you've taken out Dubai, but I think Middle East certainly is a very, very interesting choice for many people for various reasons. But then Singapore right now is already rising as a very interesting destination for global Chinese companies and individuals, and that is very obvious. We're seeing tremendous flow, from China to Singapore, in addition to Hong Kong. By the way, Hong Kong, I don't think it's going to lose its status as international financial center, but quite the contrary. Because of this geopolitical tension, for the time, forthcoming to see, Hong Kong still plays as a very important role as the huge connector between China and the rest of the world. And I also see, Japan financial markets reviving, in the recent years, and it's doing extremely well, just past its historical high, for the stock exchange. So very interesting world, and there are multiple, financial centers actually doing very well and have very bright prospect.
Fantastic. Well, you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen, that the future has been laid out for you. Please could you, we've used up all our time, please could give a big hand and thank our panelists for their excellent contribution.